of this crossing between Accra and the Pacific goes back.
For 2 years, ending in December 1980, young men and women from various countries took part in the most extraordinary modern adventure of its kind. The young explorers plunged into remote regions, facing both danger and hardship, on the way to completing their round-the-world voyage called Operation Drake. Before the voyage, the individual selection is held around the world. Among 60,000 young people, ages 17 to 24, more than 400 will be chosen. The outward-bound type of activities are designed to weed out the strongest. Among the candidates selected is a young woman from Edmonton, Canada. Despite the loss of her right leg from cancer, Anna Richards has shown the will and the courage to meet the challenge.
The prospect of getting involved in Operation Drake, even with the inconvenience of having a wooden leg, was so exciting that I wasn't going to be restricted by a few nuts and bolts. It's strange sometimes the way people react to losing limbs and of giving up. And seeing this giving up in other people has given me a determination to follow my dreams and not my disabilities.
Blessed be the ship. God the Father bless her.
Drake's prayer continues with those immortal words, "It is not the beginning, but the continuing of the same until it be thoroughly finished, that yieldeth the true glory."
I'm John Blashford-Snell, a colonel in the Royal Engineers and director of the operation, named after the voyage of Sir Francis Drake, the first Englishman to circle the globe. In the winter of 1577, Drake and his crew left Plymouth and returned again after nearly 3 years. Now, 4 centuries later, the first phase of Operation Drake will cross the Atlantic to the Caribbean and Panama. Sailing from Plymouth as Drake did, the 150-ton brigantine Eye of the Wind makes ready. Here for the official launching is the patron of the project, His Royal Highness Prince Charles. His support highlights the unique opportunities of Operation Drake for youth, for science, for international understanding and cooperation. This is the beginning of 10 separate phases until the 2-year circumnavigation is completed. Joining the ship's crew, the first 24 young explorers now faced a journey on the high seas, as well as a new testing of themselves in strange lands and difficult terrain.
I am particularly glad so many young people are able to take part in this particular operation. I think that opportunities for adventure and for achievement are very limited nowadays for the younger person. Anyway, I sincerely hope that this expedition will contribute a great deal to scientific research in particular, and to the countries that the expedition visits, and also to the young people themselves.
Hip, hip, hip! Hooray! Hip, hip, hip! Hooray! Hip, hip, hip! Hooray!
The Eye of the Wind is launched on the 22nd of October 1978, leaving the dockside at Plymouth and sailing out of the harbour, accompanied by dozens of small boats. The 132-foot square rigger, equipped with a full scientific laboratory, will soon be on its own, crossing the ocean for 23 days, on the way to some of the most challenging tropical regions of the world. On this historic day, the Prince of Wales is at the helm.
Oh yes, yes it is, and we've had it tested, and we did a test bore on the bottom of it, and we've got a lot of metal there yet. And so she's a sound ship, although she's, built in 1911, but she is a sound ship.
In addition to carrying out marine biological work, Eye of the Wind will support land-based teams of scientists and servicemen as they make extended stopovers for research and exploration, with Prince Charles back on land. The voyage begins. For the young people, there is an immediate jolt from one world to another. The first shock of life aboard ship comes sooner than expected.
As soon as we passed Plymouth breakwater, the swell was pretty large and the boat was rocking to and fro. They do say that there are two phases of seasickness. There's the first phase when you think you're going to die, and the second phase when you wish you were dying.
There was a hell of a lot to do on maintaining a boat. First thing in the morning that's done is scrub all the decks. I guess we just accepted it because these jobs have got to be done.
It's like a great big family, but you're in a confined space, which is another thing, which at first I thought was, very difficult to get used to. But then you all are going through the same thing with each other, and you go through it. You find it a pleasurable experience.
There is no time for a leisurely education. Demanding, even dangerous tasks have to be learned on the job.
Climbing up the ratlins is quite scary at times, because when the ship lurches, if it lurches to the side that you're on the ratlins, then you feel as though you're going to fall off any minute. And there's been a couple of times when I thought I was really going to fall off. But being up on the yards, when you're on the foot lines and the ship suddenly lurches, you're sort of hanging on for dear life yet again. And not many people have experienced that.
Okay, just make your way out past that central stirrup there. You see the stirrup coming down onto the foot rope? Just go out past that. Bend over, that's it, good. And you want to be careful at the foot of the upper top so it doesn't bang you on the head. Get your elbows right over like that. Down, and both hands, all right.
The adjustment to life on an ocean crossing has both its rewards and struggles. Some tasks are performed only after a series of trials and errors. One of the key aspects is learning to share the responsibility for each other's well-being and even survival. Now, a chance to prove themselves under stress. A storm is building at a rapid pace. In preparation, everything must be tied down and secured against the ever-increasing high winds. In the full fury of the force 8 gale, the Eye of the Wind is barely able to make headway, and the Atlantic's 3,000 miles seem twice as long.
I just recovered from seasickness when we really hit the force 8 gale. The only time I was frightened was when I went to take the wheel. I was trying and I just couldn't do it, and it really frightened me to be in control of the ship, and I couldn't control it.
The storm acts as a kind of initiation rite. It seems to be a prophecy of adventures and hardships to come. Each young person is somehow already changed, a new, slightly different person, by the time the ship finally reaches calmer waters.
About a week before we got to Tenerife, the water was beginning to get fairly warm, and we decided that perhaps it was about time that we had our first sea shower.
In the ship's lab, marine biology projects study various forms of ocean life near the surface, and the characteristics of a flying fish are carefully recorded.
Normal everyday things go through my mind, and I find this a fantastic opportunity just to sit back, relax, think little things about family, friends, past experiences, what I want to do in the future.
I often think of home and what my family's doing and what I'd be doing with them at the time. But I have never been lonely. There's always been somebody there. I mean, there's 36 people. You can't escape from the company.
Across the ocean at last, the Eye of the Wind makes its first important landfall at St Vincent Island.
It especially was beautiful going into St. Vincent, waking up and looking over your shoulder and seeing land. You can smell the difference. You can smell the green grass and the leaves, and sort of inside you feeling a little bit of excitement growing.
Well, 23, 24 days at sea crossing the Atlantic is a long time not to sight land at all. It was quite a feeling to think that in an hour's time we'd be back on stable ground. We could go for a walk.
It is Christmas Eve as one team starts up the volcanic mountain known as La Soufrière, 1,000 meters to the top.
With a group, one has to press forward. We're walking up single file up this volcano, and if one person ahead of me stops, okay, that makes me stop, it makes the person behind me stop. All right, so this person who stopped feels badly about it and they get going, they won't do it again. If they, even if they're just shattered and knackered, they have to stop, they won't. So it is this group pressure of go, 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 and keep up and don't let anyone down, which is fantastic.
After 2.5 hours, they finally reach the crater's rim.
But we took the climb fairly steadily, and I guess by about 10 o'clock in the morning, after a 2.5 hour climb, we were at the top looking down onto the lake, and it was really quite a spectacular sight to see just a pile of lava in the middle of this lake. To think 6 or 7 years ago nothing was there at all was quite an exciting feeling. We were wondering if in 10 minutes it might burst into life and start all over again.
Amid the excitement of making it to the top and the anticipation of descending into the core, there's awareness that only a few years before, the volcano had erupted.
It was about 1972, I think. A guy came up just after the survey was done, and they spotted something coming up out of the lake. And they sort of all came dashing back again and started measuring again. It's absolutely amazing the way it's come up. It really is.
You can even see the hot springs right in the center of the island and everything else. Can't wait for the cloud cover to get over. Nice. Let's get down. Awful smell.
God, yeah.
What is it, sulfur?
Now a journey 200 meters down, along the steep inner walls of the volcanic core.
I've never enjoyed a day so much in ages. Of actually climbing up to the top, to the crater, and the hardest task was going down into the crater rim towards the lake. It was so different to any other Christmas Eve I've ever spent, or maybe possibly ever spent, that it'll live in my memory for the rest of my life.
The lake inside the volcano seems to be a forbidden world that knows no clock or calendar, a place where even the wind appears to go by a separate set of natural laws, where anything can happen at any time without warning.
Having got to the lakeside, it was quite a battle getting round because the wind gets caught inside the volcano and whistles round in all directions, so to row round was quite an effort.
In their inflatable dinghy, they head for the island created by lava during the previous eruption. When the crater lake's about to boil, the water turns from a striking turquoise to the colour of muddy mustard. The question is why and how, and most important, when. The island appears to be much larger than expected. Nothing more than lifeless rocks, difficult to walk on. It feels as if one has trespassed onto a dead planet where no life belongs. But now a discovery of new recent growth.
Moths. I know, I found some below, but I think this is a different family altogether. I think they're very small. The others were much thicker in their leaves and stem. You've got lichen in moss here. Well, you know, that frog. Well, that'll keep Trish happy. It's home.
The search continues, As they move toward the very center of the core, they are walking on a giant plug made of lava. With an eruption, the plug will be blown skyward by fire.
The rock's beginning to get warm. Okay.
The team has found an increase in both water temperature and simmering volcanic activity. Since the previous explosion, plant life and many forms of tiny living creatures have gradually recolonized the island. The plant life is meticulously noted and catalogued for future study.
Right, 20 yards in from water's edge.
Yep. I then started on the first circumnavigation of the island, taking water temperatures. To one spot we started to get a bit worried because the temperature suddenly shot up to about 47 degrees C, and the whole area was really warm. The air was warm. It was certainly pretty hot. You couldn't put your hands in the water. And we had to make a rapid retreat just in case something started to happen to the craft.
Just 3 months later, or a mere second in geological time, La Soufrière erupted again. The crater island where the explorers had walked was obliterated, and St Vincent was showered with ash. The eye of the wind continues westward, through the Caribbean, and arrives at the crossroads of the world, Colon, Panama, where the isthmus provides the narrowest link between two great continents. The young explorers of Operation Drake are about to go back in time to rediscover history and recreate one of its most significant chapters, Balboa's jungle crossing from Atlantic to Pacific. They leave the brigantine at Colon for a special flight into Caledonia Bay to be airlifted into a base camp deep in the jungle of Darien.
Flying in that small plane, for a start, was a bit hair-raising at times. The islands, I was quite surprised that they were so crowded on them, because apparently they go out onto the little islands just to keep away from the insects on the mainland.
The whole trip down was really exciting. We were traveling over jungle, dense jungle that we had read about, the coastline, which was just magnificent. Then we came down quite a thump. Our landing was supposed to be quite hairy. The airstrip is only 440 yards long, and we landed and stopped at 400 yards and got off, and right away we were told where our tents were, where we were going to sleep, the daily procedure, and it was all fabulous. We didn't have a chance to assess the joint, and that was probably the best psychology that they've used yet.
From the outset, they begin to experience the harsh realities of life in the jungle. A 2-week tropical downpour gives just one indication of what the very first explorers here had encountered. But rain is not the only problem. There is no way to avoid the tiny sandflies that can penetrate even the thickest mosquito nets. They must learn to protect their bodies by chewing tobacco and dabbing it on the ticks to make them drop off without leaving festering sores. Dysentery, skin rashes from prickly heat, and a spectrum of other medical problems become a way of life. One young man requires an operation to remove a live worm from his leg. Despite her wooden leg, Anna Richards joins a special mission to pay a visit to the local Kuna Indians on one of the nearby islands. The expedition members hope to carry out research into vitamin deficiencies in the Kuna diet. But they know that first they are going as strangers who must try to befriend the descendants of an ancient people. The early explorers who first came upon these shores were in search of gold and treasure, and they were quite willing to kill the natives and destroy their culture in order to find it. But this mission of modern exploration seeks to give help and hope against pollution and disease. The natives are curious, but only the children display an immediate openness and lack of caution. Some 20,000 Kuna Indians live on the 365 islands of the San Blas archipelago along the Atlantic coast of Panama. Their fishing goes on from sunrise to sunset. The Indians seem to realize that a very unique individual has arrived in their midst.
It was strange first arriving on this tiny little island, full of all these strange people that we'd never seen before. The Kuna Indians have very rarely seen white people, and suddenly this expedition with 4 girls arrived on the island to spend a month doing all sorts of medical tests on the children. At first they seemed very apprehensive because we were different. We had blonde hair, we were wearing trousers. We were much taller than they were.
A modern camera and an ancient Kuna dance both become part of the bridge between two cultures. At a local hospital, a series of tests are carried out on Kuna children, aimed at weighing the causes behind their malnutrition. Their ability to see in the dark is measured by a special device and used to determine the deficiency of vitamin A in their diet. For these Indian children, TB and gastroenteritis are common, as well as protein malnutrition and worm infestation.
Is there a 117?
And for some still unexplained reason, there is also the highest rate of albinism in the world. Anna and Helen Mallinson of England slowly gain the confidence of the natives by joining in their activities during a typical day. Aside from their problems involving health, the children here are just like children anywhere across the globe.
Hey, Bermudas!
For Anna, the experience is that of a modern-day woman suddenly jolted into primitive conditions where privacy is almost unknown and luxuries such as bathing and grooming are minimal at best. At last, an invitation into the home of a Kuna family. The native women share some of their techniques for preparing a meal, bananas being an important part of the local diet.
6, 7, sit rep as follows. Another good day, stop. Anna and Helen aided in first baby delivery.
The visit of Anna Richards may help the new generation of these Indians to overcome their problems and grow up healthy and strong. Meanwhile, another team sets off to explore the remains of the tragic Scots colony of Darien. It was in 1697 when Scottish settlers came here to Caledonia and built a rampart for protection against the angry Spaniards who were here first. Fort St Andrew and the tiny settlement was soon overwhelmed by disease and Spanish attack. The young explorers find the first evidence, a defensive moat, and now the site must be cleared.
The site is intensely interesting, actually. Well, the main thing we're doing here, really, in our short time, is just the digging and the macheting and the troweling over, which you've got to do before you can get down to the basics.
It is no small task to remove the overgrowth of centuries. At the same time, there is mounting excitement over coming closer and closer to the physical evidence of history.
This is probably the most recent site as far as historical value goes, and as far as size goes, it's the biggest one. Compared to so many sites that I've, seen either being excavated or read about something like that, that people can go on, archaeologists go on for months, some years, before they find something. They get hints about certain areas and they keep going, and here, it's a gold mine. I haven't gone a day yet where I haven't found at least one object.
The site yields some of the most important findings of 17th century Scottish pottery and ceramics. Military artifacts attest to constant battles with the Spanish. Remnants of the fort recall the Scots' futile attempt to protect themselves against bombardment. The archaeological investigation is the first to be made since the Scots colony was abandoned in 1700. More than 1,000 Scots lost their lives before the last of them, disease-ridden and defeated, crawled to their ships and set sail back across the ocean to Europe. The next search is for the remains of a Scottish ship that may have sunk in the harbour.
Your mask is a window to diving. Without a good mask...
A team of Operation Drake divers will explore the muddy bottom of Caledonia Bay at one suspected location.
It's very important that when you start off, you have a nice mask.
No wreck has ever been found since the Scottish colony was destroyed nearly 300 years ago. The search goes on for several weeks. A major discovery: the divers bring up materials from a wreck buried deep in mud alongside a reef.
If you look at it carefully, you can see nail holes in it. See?
The explorers begin to realize that this is the most important historical wreck site so far uncovered in Panamanian waters.
Yeah. But this hole that we're in, it's definitely the tip of the iceberg, because it's all around.
In 1699, the brandy aboard the resupply ship Olive Branch caught fire and she sank without a trace.
Suspense. Oh, man. Gee, the whole nail. Another one.
On hand for the inspection is Anna Richards, sharing the indescribable feeling of making direct contact with another age. A crossing of the Isthmus of Panama, following the route that Balboa took, will be led by former Royal Marine Commando George Thurston.
The story of this crossing between Akla and the Pacific goes back to the year 1515. That was when Balboa did it, and he took 2 boats. The next team was a Dutch botanical expedition in 1853. The lot of them perished. Quite recently, an American team has tried to do it. 6 of them died. The next one on the list is us. We plan to follow the rivers, because that is how Balboa must have done it.
Of the Operation Drake team, only 11 members will go. Denise Wilson of England is among those wondering if they might be chosen for what promises to be a harrowing experience.
Is Kirk Drinkwater, with Dennis Wilson, Robin Murray, Denise Wilson, Robin Murray, Irving Bennett, and Guardia Murillo.
Denise, a secretary in a London brewery, and 2 other women become the first females to try crossing the jungle in Balboa's treacherous path.
I was very enthusiastic, but at the same time apprehensive about exactly what I was getting into. It wasn't quite certain whether there was going to be a helicopter standing by to resupply or to bring things out to us or pick people up if they were ill. And it was quite terrifying to think that we could get 2 or 3 days out, have covered quite a few kilometres, and then suddenly have to start heading back again, somebody on a stretcher. And we just couldn't really set out straight away again. We'd have to rethink.
The group sets out for Akla, where Balboa made his own base camp. From Akla, they will try to make it on foot through 180 kilometers of jungle. Balboa used the Akla base camp as a place to dismantle ships on the Atlantic side before hauling the pieces through the jungle for reassembly on the Pacific. The Panamanian natives are by turn curious and amazed to think that anyone would even try the crossing, much less succeed.
Don't forget the tail end Charlies of each section. Keep contact with the ones behind you. Don't forget also the section at the back is responsible for looking after the tail end. And don't forget what somebody else said to you about the last man. He is a danger from the curiosity of big animals. While we've got good food inside us, we're going to make as much ground as we can today between now and 3 o'clock.
The multinational group sets off to share a test of teamwork on a journey of self-discovery.
I feel that if I get through the first 5 or 6 days, I think that'll be, from there on it ought to be much easier, and I think once we're into the routine of walking and going and being wet and being dry and being wet again, then things will be much easier. It's less the physical side that I'm anxious about. It's just a clash of personalities over 30 days, which might be difficult.
As they follow the river inland, George Thurston sends back radio reports.
Wading and often chest
deep water and thick mud, full stop. Quicksands encountered 3 times, full stop.
Making their first camp, the group is concerned about the oppressive heat, the availability of water, and the ever-present threat of infection. If anything goes wrong, a signal to the outside world is essential for a rescue party to succeed.
The morning that we found out the radio was broken, irretrievably, I was only thinking about it later when we were walking that if somebody does break a leg now, we are going to have to walk all the way back.
Hello, 6-5, this is 0. If you can hear me, give me 3 blasts, 3 blasts, over.
Peculiar to think that we were so isolated. It was up to somebody else to get in contact with us. I was completely unaware of what was going to happen when I walked into the swamp, because people had been telling me that, oh, it's deep and it smells. But when you were standing outside waiting for the guardia to lead us in, it looked as though it was up to about his knees and that was going to be it. And all of a sudden he sank about 3 feet. And it was quite a shock sort of standing there and waiting to just follow him in. But no, I was quite unprepared for what it was going to be like. None of my conceptions of what it would be like came true at all. It was much worse. I didn't expect the water to feel so thick and slimy. When we were stood, you could feel the water clinging to your skin and to your clothes. And I never quite felt anything like that before. It was dreadful. I think the leeches and the bugs are the worst part about it, because in that sort of water, you wouldn't actually be able to feel anything biting you. It's a horrible thought to think that other creatures are living from your body, actually attaching themselves to it, and you're completely unaware of it. And that you're going to have to deal with it as soon as you get out of there.
Six miles from Akla, Sergeant Mike Christie of the Royal Engineers has been constructing a spectacular aerial walkway, more than 100 feet up above the jungle floor. The treetop crew of Operation Drake will use the network of suspended pathways to make studies of the ecology up in the mysterious, normally inaccessible universe of the forest canopy. Among the young explorers helping in the construction is Claire Birchinger, a professional nurse. The walkways and platforms will enable scientists on the expedition to collect a number of biological samples at different heights. But physical strain and dehydration pose a constant threat to the health of even the strongest men and women. Just before completion of the walkway, Claire is struck down by a viral infection. She must be evacuated at once, carried back through the jungle. At the same time, a persistent Anna Richards, despite her own great handicap, remarkably makes the 6-mile trip to the aerial construction site. She is determined to take part in the unusual biological studies, even though her one healthy leg has been pushed almost beyond the point of strength and endurance.
In having cancer and being a survivor makes you very much a more determined person to do things that you believe you might be able to do. It somehow makes you feel that you should try and fit in as much into your life as you can during the period that you're still a survivor. The only thing that could go wrong is if my nuts and bolts in my knee start falling out, then I'm in problems. But I have brought some wrenches and screws and things with me in case. I have enough antibiotics, I think, to last everybody if they had a wooden leg. So. It's beautiful up here.
So, river comes down to the point there. You can see it at the point from further up.
Mm.
There it is down there. Put both hands down here.
Okay.
The swaying walkway is precarious, even for a strong person with the use of both legs.
All right. Is that okay?
Yeah, fine. Are you okay?
Yeah. Once you get down there, you'll be able to walk.
But Anna's determination pays off. She's able to make many of the scientific observations on her own, helping to cite some 70 species of vine, tree, flower and fruit to determine the role of birds, insects and even bats in pollinating the canopy.
In most difficult conditions yet.
By now, the Balboa Patrol faces trouble. Leader George Thurston makes use of a new radio.
We just don't know at the moment, but things were pretty bad on the way down here. Established a camp. This is a location of last known water. Supply is stagnant and all rivers in area dry. Full stop.
The only water lies in stagnant jungle pools used by wild pigs, filtered as much as possible but still almost unbearable to drink.
Have today made good 18 kilometers, but no water of any sort found today. Full stop. Roger Safarova.
It was very hot while we were walking. I was beginning to get really tired at that point, and I was sweating an awful lot, and I just didn't have the water to replace what I was losing. George made it obvious that, I had to have more water than other people. It made me feel dreadful. But I just began to feel drained. I just needed water, and it just wasn't there. And the worst time was when you got into your hammock in the evening, and you knew there was water in your water bottle, but you just couldn't touch it. You just got to leave it there. And your mouth was sticking together. It's a feeling I'll never forget.
With mounting concern over the endangered patrol, helicopter teams are dispatched in a rescue mission. The only feasible plan is to hop from village to village and question the natives who may know where to search above the dense jungle canopy. The helicopter teams are aware that time is running out. In temperatures where the body needs a gallon of water per day to survive, the young explorers have no more than a pint apiece.
The end of that day, people found very, very hard because they were maybe covered in ticks. There were no prospect of water. So we just set about clearing the landing site with every single last ounce of strength we had. I've reached the point of absolute physical exhaustion. I knew I was going to collapse within 2 or 3 minutes, so I just lay down.
After 14 days in the jungle, the Lost Patrol does not realize that the Pan-American Highway is just a few miles from where they are stranded. The patrol is completely hidden beneath the unbroken canopy of treetops, and yet a miraculous sighting of the single tiny spot that the patrol has managed to clear. A smaller helicopter is dispatched to the area so crucial supplies can be lowered.
We'd heard the helicopter twice flying overhead, but they'd never seen us. And the feeling when the helicopter went straight over, circled round, the fact that they had seen us, it was an incredible feeling of relief. It was just so good to be in contact again.
The group of explorers is on the verge of exhaustion and collapse. A few are in serious condition. The most severe casualties must be evacuated to receive emergency care. Miles Clark of Great Britain sums up the feeling.
It was like being lifted out of a nightmare when the chopper was actually winching me up. And I tried to make myself take in as much of it as I could while I was going up, because I knew that it was something I'd remember all my life. The whole thing faded almost like a dot in the center of a television screen going away, and I suddenly found myself in a completely different situation. When I saw the blanket of jungle that they'd been searching for us in, I started to realize then what a miracle it was that they'd managed to find us at all.
A total of 4 patrol members have been taken out of the jungle, but the remainder of the team continues on, replenished with water and determined to reach their goal. For that final few miles, it still requires 2 more days of hiking. They finally stumble out onto the Pan American Highway.
Like guerrilla style?
I've recognised a physical and mental limit in myself. I know now that I can push myself. I'm much more resilient than I thought I was.
For George Thurston, there is the unparalleled satisfaction of having led the patrol through near disaster and out the other end to safety. And for Denise,
I didn't realise that I was looking forward so much to seeing the Pan American Highway. We knew that we'd got to hit it somewhere. But when we saw it, it was just the emotion that arose. Anne and I, there were just tears in our eyes. It was just so good to see the place and realise that we were practically home and dry.
Cheers, George. 3 cheers for George. Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray!
exhausted but elated, the first women ever to make the crossing were Anne Smith of Canada, Denise Wilson of England, and Cathy Davis of Scotland.
Back to the chai. That one. Chai.
Yesterday was the hardest day of my life.
How do you like it this time?
No, that's it.
We really walked very hard. And, you know, most of the time my legs felt like they weren't part of my body.
No, you
But
want
today
to
it's
sweat, it
been
looks more natural
just
with the
realising we were so close, you know.
You're a film star.
It's just so good.
Allez.
Just can't explain how I'm feeling, just so relieved.
Loco.
Great feeling.
Aqui. Auckland. You mean, no.
What's going directly to the anchor?
The first phases of Operation Drake leave a group of indomitable young people with the knowledge that they've accomplished things of which they've never even dreamed. They had crossed the Atlantic in a two-masted, square-rigged vessel. Learning to cope on the high seas, they'd come to the New World, much as the earliest explorers had done. They climbed into a volcano's very core, excavated a long-lost colony of European settlers, discovered a sunken supply ship 300 years old, and constructed a walkway on the rooftop of an equatorial forest. They came, as others had done centuries before, to a hostile land waiting with dread diseases and unbearable hardships. They even retraced the steps of Balboa's historic crossing to the Pacific. For each member of the voyage, the Eye of the Wind is now forever a symbol of personal achievement in the service of mankind. The ship is called the Eye of the Wind. The voyage is part of an extraordinary venture known as Operation Drake. The 2-year expedition circumnavigated the globe. Young explorers journeyed into remote regions and made new discoveries. the expeditions were filled with hazards and tests of courage, with fascinating sights that few, if any, modern men have ever witnessed. Operation Drake. Papua New Guinea has been called the last unknown, a land where many of the people remain almost totally unconnected to the modern world. According to legend, this tribe once accidentally frightened its enemies by emerging from a swamp caked with dried mud. To this day, they are called the Mudmen. Nearly 1,000 tribes, often just a mile one from the other, speak in 700 distinctly separate languages. In dress and makeup, in ritualistic dancing, the ancient culture still finds its full expression. In the most remote areas, tribal groups retain nearly total autonomy, and they continue with traditions and beliefs inherited directly from centuries of the past. The people are steeped in superstitions involving warfare and death. By reputation, they practice headhunting and cannibalism, and yet the limestone burial ledges are sacred places. Transported by Papua New Guinea flyers, a new contingent from Operation Drake begins another phase. Among the multinational young explorers are two from the United States, Reuben Jakes of California and Stan Glass of New York, on their way to join a new group of 24. And we then looked at the beginning, the group joins me, John Blashford-Snell, a Royal Engineer Colonel, for a briefing. As director of Operation Drake, it's my task to put our adventure into perspective, with knowledge of the past and with some idea of what to expect in the very near future.
I know that the newspapers will go on saying that we're following the route of Drake. We're not. He didn't have the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal when he was around, and of course, as you know, we're going through both of them. The only connection really with Drake is the anniversary. It is the 400th anniversary since Drake went around the world, and I'm sure you know the story. He went around to reduce income tax for Great Britain. Part of this is the problem of the weather. This country, as you know, is 14,600 feet high. There are huge swamps down at low level and massive mountains which sometimes have snow on them at high level.
This is the eastern half of Papua New Guinea, on an island of the southwest Pacific, just a few hundred miles north of Australia and only 2 degrees below the equator. The landscape is varied, with continuous high volcanic mountains, deep valleys, rivers and ravines, making exploration a difficult task. Courses in how to survive in the jungle are essential.
As you may be aware, New Guinea has got a vast range of conditions. This means that you've got a very great range of animal life.
A jungle expert from the Australian Army instructs the group from Operation Drake.
Papua New Guinea, in fact, has got the largest insects in the world. The largest insects and butterflies. As an example, that's a grasshopper. You'd like to just pass it around and have a look. Some of the more nasty ones, that's a centipede. A very painful bite. Scorpion. These have all been gathered from around the camp area. Kids bring them in.
He warns the youngsters that even tiny scratches of the skin must be treated right away. Otherwise, the result is a tropical ulcer with possibly long-term complications.
That's 2 weeks old and it's just starting to clear up now. That's a very small one. I knocked it on a table. The hole is about 1/4 of an inch deep down to the bone. You know, it'll probably be another 3 or 4 weeks before it finally closes over, if I can keep it clean that long. And that happened within 24 hours.
The rainfall in Papua New Guinea can reach 250 inches per year. The group must learn to put up tents and cope with life in the jungle amid unceasing tropical downpours. For each member, including Stan Glass, there is no choice but to keep at it.
Sticks each night, so we won't have to chop them down.
The experience is fraught with trial and error, especially for Reuben Jakes.
Well, I got a little wet last night because I set up a little wrong and I tied my mosquito net to the ends of this thing, and the water ran down the string and then got into my bunk. But if not, I'm not gonna do it that way, so I should stay dry, I hope.
What mistake are you gonna make tonight?
I don't know. Every night so far I seem to make mistakes, but tonight I'm going to try to do it right this time. So.
One more adjustment for the group is having to wash down dehydrated army rations.
Pour them down.
The tropical rain goes on day after day until it seems that the sun may never appear. And as for Reuben...
God damn, I got them all over the place. Because when your skin gets all wet and it's always moist, then they just split easily. Look at my hands. Look, they're all shriveled up. My hands are worse than yours.
Yeah. Well, that's because you slept in a puddle last night. You're a mess.
I know.
You'll never lose the tape.
Sure I will. I just got a couple cuts, but...
I'm wet.
Sally Mountford of New Zealand.
I think we're mad. If it's not going to clear up, we should go home.
But for Reuben, the rain is just one of many bothersome factors. His cheerful confidence is put to still another test. It's time to move out of the bush, but even here, human vanity has a way of persisting.
Band-aid on the forehead and all. Yeah, I'm shedding, man.
The roar of thunder is replaced by that of a raging river. The young explorers get first instructions on how to cross it.
The first thing we've got to do is to put a rope across so that you've got something to hang on to.
Bryce Baith of New Zealand will attempt to cross alone.
Let it come. Oh, swim for it, Mike. Yep, okay.
The current is much stronger than expected. Its pull seems overwhelming. One big danger is from loose boulders that often cascade downriver. And if the rope becomes snagged on a rock, the swimmer would quickly find himself pulled under. Meanwhile, the contest of strength goes on. A much heavier rope is attached to the light one and pulled across.
Now slowly.
Sally carries her pack loosely on one arm to be able to grip the rope with both hands and also to ditch the pack quickly if need be. The force of the river is so strong that Sally's pack begins to slip away. Suddenly, she is in danger of being swept away. Teamwork fights against the river swollen with rain and just barely avoids calamity.
That's all right.
Caroline Buxton from Jersey has never gone camping before, much less attempted to cross a wild river.
Swim in towards the bank!
To make the perilous crossing, some require more help than others. But for all, the experience is a reminder that life here has no guarantee from one moment to the next. Another Operation Drake team is flown deep into the unknown Western Highlands, to the headwaters of the mighty Strickland River, to try to run rapids that have never before been boated or even charted. The Strickland flows south, down 12,000 feet and 250 miles to join the Fly River on its way to the Coral Sea. The boating party is dropped above river at Copiago village. Each man is chosen for experience. The only young explorer on hand, Yogi Thami, a river runner from Nepal.
but it's worn out. Been about a year since I've been using it.
In charge of the Strickland River project is Major Roger Chapman, one of the most experienced whitewater men in the world, now faced with a long trek just to get there.
We'll be going through tomorrow through the rainforest, right the way down to the Strickland.
The group has negotiated with a village leader for native carriers of supplies and equipment. The porters use only bare feet over the sharp rocks. In addition to the supplies, the oars and long metal frames of the boats must be carried to the river. The boats themselves will be airdropped at the end of the two-day journey. The bush country here is among the least known of the world's remote areas. When government officials arrived before the Second World War, they made contact with some tribes for the first time ever, and were surprised to come upon valleys as high as 9,000 feet, virtually hidden from the rest of mankind. Over the uncultivated kunai grass, the carriers use a tribal working chant, a form of communication across the valley, from one hilltop to another. The chant is a kind of yodeling call, a warning that strangers are approaching, meaning no harm. After all, some of the people who live here are totally unaware of the world that exists beyond the hills. At last, near the Strickland River, a government Dakota approaches for the airdrop, while a sapper staff sergeant attempts to guide him by radio.
Red on now. Execute now. Over.
Even if pilots do find their way through the mountains, the ravines and sharp rocks make it too dangerous for men to be parachuted in. This pilot is extremely adept at negotiating the unpredictable terrain.
Hello, Defense 03, this is 3-1. That kit landed within about 30 meters.
In the crates are two large inflatable boats. The carriers, who cannot swim, watch with interest as each boat is launched on the uncharted river. Operation Drake Party will have 4 men in each boat. Here, the Strickland proves navigable. The team can provide valuable data for the Papua New Guinea government in terms of the river navigation. The oldest and most experienced man on the team is Captain Jim Masters of Great Britain. The party is on a section of river that drops 3,000 feet within 70 miles, and yet there are no large waterfalls, so perhaps the upper Strickland can be developed as a means of transport. But after 3 days, the Strickland begins to change, from a wide, calm river to one of increasing narrowness and power. The explorers are aware that soon the water will start to plummet through a deep gorge, as if emptying down into a chute, to a perilous spot called Devil's Race. Strickland begins to show a more violent, menacing face and threatens to live up fully to his reputation. The party must pull over. The rapids become lined with steep, razor-sharp limestone walls. In places, only 15 feet separate one ledge from another. It's called the Kowiji Crossing, a narrow gorge with raging rapids of such violence that no boats could run them. That night, a well-deserved rest. The next morning begins the back-breaking work of portaging the boats over difficult rocks at the edge. The high altitude makes the task even more difficult. Still, the team hopes to find a spot downriver where the boating can continue. Soon, the local carriers will leave, having really earned their pay, and head back to their village in the highlands. By the morning's end, the men are exhausted and hungry. To make matters worse, a storm breaks out before they can have their lunch. Despite sore muscles and extreme physical discomfort, the men quietly regain the strength of body and spirit for the difficult task of lining the boats. These are the last big rapids and the worst of all. The boats are set afloat while the men attempt to guide them from the rocky shore as the white water carries them down. Each boat contains equipment and supplies for half the party. If either should be lost, the expedition would be in jeopardy. One boat has made it through and is secured. Now all attention turns to the second boat. It seems to be moving safely through the fierce waves, but suddenly the line is snagged on a rock. Frantically, Jim Masters tries to give it snap. That works, but all of a sudden the line attached to the first boat becomes dangerously taut. Apparently it's caught in a stopper wave farther downstream. Helplessly they watch as the line is strained to its limit. The boat goes free. As it cascades downstream, the men are aware that chasing it will be futile. Although the second boat is safely ashore, the 8 men are stranded. They are some 600 miles from base camp and have no means to continue or retreat. By sheer luck, a small helicopter a few hundred miles away hears their radio call and comes to help in a search for the lost boat. Jim Masters is aboard as the helicopter heads south, downstream over the Devil's Race. Jim reports to the group.
Well, there's one oar.
Where's that?
But that's way, way down, and it could have been the single oar that we lost earlier on, you know, when we turned over.
Yeah.
There's no sign, no evidence at all of the boat.
It would be, I think, foolhardy to go on, and in this situation, reluctantly, I'm going to have to say that we're going to have to stick it here for the next 3 days, until the morning of the 9th, and then get picked out. You know, there's 3 months, 4 months work on West, I'm afraid, but there we are. This thing has happened, and I'm sure this is the right move to take.
Do you not think it'd be worth it?
The other men disagree. They would rather continue despite the risk of losing all the remaining supplies.
I think it's all right. Wherever it is, it's all right.
Well, we've got all the notes and all the details of the river, and maybe, you know, someone with a little more luck than us can follow in our paths. It's all there now.
After a 3-day wait, without shelter and little food, the men are airlifted off and the boat is found, a full 20 kilometers downstream on a sandbank. One of the key Pacific battlegrounds in the Second World War was the bush country of New Guinea. It was in May 1942 that the Battle of the Coral Sea enabled the Allies to frustrate the Japanese drive in the Pacific. If Port Moresby had fallen, Australia would have faced certain invasion. Relics from the battle still abound. The young explorers of Operation Drake head for the northeast section of Papua New Guinea, where Australians and Americans fought Japanese soldiers in the jungle.
It's a very obvious feature, and we'll see it when we get down to Mubo.
The mission is also a personal one. Clem Grehan of Australia seeks to retrace the footsteps of his father, who fought here during the war and was wounded at Salamoa. With Clem is Colonel Robin Jordan of the Royal Engineers.
The Australians were roughly in that line there, Waipale, Waragaso, Namibia Ridge.
He came through, I think, in later 43, and they were, well, his company were tied up in mopping up, you know, any small Japanese strongholds.
So that was after the capture of Salamoa and Lae.
Yeah.
So how does it feel to be sort of walking the same ground your father walked 26 years ago?
It's pretty good, but I feel a little bit of sympathy for the fellows at 40 because the trail's hard enough as it is. To have to carry a rifle and then look about you all the time would be darn sight harder than what we're doing.
0 Bravo, this is 3-4. We are at Mubo, repeat Mubo. Grid reference on WOW map.
Mobo was the scene of bitter fighting along the Black Cat Trail, still strewn with relics left in the exact positions where they'd been more than 35 years before.
No grenades or anything, eh?
There's a heck of a lot of history, and it's all simply rotting. I do think war relics are worth keeping for the simple reason that they do remind people of the events of the war. The Japanese quite aggressively attacked here in the South Pacific, and they were quite ruthless. And they were quite ruthlessly beaten. And a relic is a monument to the brave Japanese, for a start, and then the equally or brave, better Australians and Americans.
Looks like a bit of a defensive position, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right, top of the knoll.
Top of the ridge, innit?
Yeah. Get anyone coming that way?
The Japanese took Salamoa and marched to the south, but the Allies stopped them at Wau. It was on the Wau-Salamoa trail where Clem's father had been most involved in the action. Now his son has returned.
I definitely know he was around this area. I'll have to, when I get back to Australia, see some of the fellas in his company. One of the few. There's not too many alive at the moment, but...
The longer you're on the trail, the more respect you can give to the guys who are on here, can't you?
Yeah. Well, he was up here for a good couple of years, and well, look at the mozzies here now. But I know he had a tropical ulcer for nigh on a year, just couldn't get rid of it, and just some of the other injuries and bung ankles and...
Yeah, we've just been here 3 days, haven't we?
Yeah, and all we've really been doing is bushwalking.
Yeah.
Hard,
yeah.
Really hard. Beats me how they did it. Yeah.
They reached Salamoa near the coast, where the Japanese had their base. With other Australian soldiers, Clem's father came here to finish the battle, but the Japanese kept slipping away through the jungle, regrouping to fight again.
Well, Dad was wounded by a grenade. He was a great character, very just. I love my father, and I'm very sorry he's not here now to just recount his tales, because I'm sure it would be very, very interesting to just hear what he had to say. Only about 3 weeks before he died did he just open up, and he told me things about the war. He just didn't ever come out and discuss it. You know, it's a thorn in your side that you like to forget.
For Clem, the past suddenly comes to life.
How long?
Up in the Finisterre mountain range, natives have reported seeing a large wartime aircraft that crashed in the hills. Inaccurate maps often caused pilots to misjudge the mountains by thousands of feet.
If you take us today, how long will it take us to get there? So will we get to the plane today?
No.
No, tomorrow morning.
Did ask Yamoro if he saw any evidence of a man, because it looks as though the pilot parachuted out. So ask him if he's seen any evidence of a man or... No. And this cord Yamoro got out of a tree.
Yeah, it was hanging on a tree and he got it.
Ah, maybe the pilot will shoot it out.
Is best,
We'll have a look when we get up there. Anyway. See what else we can.
They start out, with some of the local people acting as guides, leaving the village and marching into the bush. In the jungle, they climb higher and higher as they head toward 11,000 feet. Some local guides begin to drop out because of the cold. Without any guidance, finding the lost plane will be a matter of guesswork and sheer luck, but some guides stick with it. Leading the patrol is Lieutenant James Horlick of the Scots Guards. And finally, the long jungle climb begins to pay off.
That's the end of a wing. Yeah, bits all over the place, you see, yeah.
In the cold, wet, clammy forest, they search for any human remains.
This is the stuff you must have got out of the tree. Yeah, that's...
Parachute.
Yeah.
The presence of the parachute indicates that the pilot probably crashed with the plane.
That's right.
Well, it looks like our friend the pilot didn't get very far, didn't it?
It's in English, so it's got to be an American plane. Yeah. And looks like...
Inspection hull.
Hull or something, yeah. Did analyze this hull or add any other. So... Yeah. Is this tyre, James? Come and have a look. See what we can find on it.
Yeah, you'll be able to find the writing and scrape it away.
This is a big tyre, isn't it? General Tyre and Rubber Company.
There's more.
There is no sign of the remains of the crew. After the crash, survivors probably stumbled off into the jungle and died here on the mountain.
Hey, what's this?
It's a signal pistol. American type, 1 or 2 inch. There you are, you can see it in the barrel. That could be cleaned up.
True.
Whoa.
You got a serial number there?
Discovery of the plane's serial number is the most important development. Perhaps at long last, the facts can be put together. A husband, a father, a brother, missing in action since World War II, can finally be put to rest.
8A-0.
6477A-0.
So we've got 4 engine, which gives us a heavy bomber, which...
Big plane, yeah.
But it must presumably be a B-17, don't we think? And B-17s are certainly obeyed.
That's right, yeah. It's American. It's got a blue painted undercarriage and just
it's quite interesting
greeny brown. Major wreckage for 50 metres that way, and there's more stuff, another 50, so that's 100 odd metres that way. And it's come in here, and this is about 10 or 11,000 feet.
It's near the top of the range.
Yeah, near the top of this 12,000 foot hill. And it's just clipped this, I reckon he's just clipped this ridge here through the cloud or something, and it looks as though he's been loaded with bombs.
Attempts will be made to trace the plane's history, to find the identities of pilot and crew, and even, if possible, to contact surviving relatives. All war relics will be given to the Papua New Guinea government, and United States authorities will be informed about the details of the plane. Continuous aerial bombardment of the Japanese occurred in Rabaul Harbour, off an island near the northeast tip of Papua New Guinea. Carrier-based American warplanes annihilated the Japanese carriers, sending some 40 ships to the bottom. Using some of the same black and white film footage to pinpoint a spot in the harbour, Clem and RAF diver Dave Whitehall are briefed before diving down to see what's there.
Level us.
And we stay off at that depth,
Okay.
3 metres. Distress signal?
Underwater. On top, yes.
By all accounts, the Japanese ships have been resting down here for 37 years. The divers are literally heading down to touch the past. The first sign, a grotesque relic of a once proud warship. Boxes once filled with deadly shells. A still recognizable anchor. Clem cautiously enters the ship's hull. Skull and bones of a Japanese sailor. He carefully puts the bones back in place, out of respect for a man who died as he fought for his country. The divers move on and find a large gun aboard the Japanese ship, now rendered useless by the corrosion of time and sea. After resurfacing and moving to a more shallow section of the harbour, Clem is startled by the unlikely sight of a tank, so remarkably preserved as if a page of history has been frozen here under the sea. Shells that were never fired, but as Clem examines them, he's reminded of the reality that these were intended to be instruments of death. Beneath the shallow waters of the harbour lies a tank graveyard. Apparently they are tanks from a landing craft, prematurely driven off a carrier under the pressure of heavy battle. A magazine clip for an automatic rifle, still intact. Other young explorers are invited to watch the ritual dancing of a secret tribal society known as the Duk-Duk men. The dance is conducted at the edge of Rabaul Harbour, invoking the spirit of the sea. It may well be that this is the first time in history for this ceremonial dance to be captured on film. The Duk-Duk men allow no one to see them getting in or out of costume. Normally women are not even permitted to witness the ritual. On hand is Bryce Baith, a young explorer from New Zealand. By custom, the spectators offer different forms of payment for the performance. About 20 kilometers away, on Duke of York Island, Bryce and others from Operation Drake come to witness an even more incredible ritual, the lassoing of a shark. The ritual is normally performed to celebrate an important event, a marriage or perhaps the birth of a son. To the outside world, the claim that such a feat is possible would certainly meet with a skeptical reaction. The people believe in a spiritual communication with sharks, with the aid of vibrations from coconut shells. They believe that man and shark must fight a long, lone battle with each other. Before the event, a witch doctor's ceremony with ash, symbolizing purity and ensuring that evil spirits will be kept away. Everyone takes position offshore, carefully getting set for what seems to be an unlikely result. For the children, the ritual is apparently a far less solemn event. An elder calls to the unseen shark. The rattle of the coconut shells sends a vibration through the water, which the people claim is an irresistible signal to the shark. Although time wears on, the people are confident and patient. Suddenly, one of them calls out that a shark is nearby. A dead fish at the end of a rod is drawn through the lasso. The shark appears and follows into the loop where it's quickly caught by the tightened rope. The shark will have to wear itself out. To keep alive, it needs to move, so the water can keep passing across its gills. But the rope around the gills acts to suffocate the shark. The people keep track of its movements by watching the floating board. At last, they paddle over to retrieve it. Usually a shark is still alive and fully able to strike at the man who brings it up. But this one has been totally beaten, and the fight is over. Once again, an ancient custom is played out, as if the 20th century had not arrived. On the vessel Andiwa, arriving at Masingara, the young explorers prepare to set off on a quest to find a legendary dragon. Over the years, eyewitness reports have told of a giant creature in Papua New Guinea. Referred to as a tree crocodile, or by the local name of Atrilia, the creature could be a giant Salvador monitor lizard. But some reports tell of a dinosaur-like animal up to 50 feet in length. The people say that it climbs trees, breathes fire, stands on its hind legs, walks at night, and kills human beings.
Does anyone know what it sounds like when it whistles?
By going from village to village, perhaps a common picture of the beast will emerge. The reports have a general similarity, including descriptions of a long, thin tail and huge claws that can tear a man apart. In this vast, flat, swampy area, there is suddenly the sight of a large footprint, but a closer look reveals it was made by an ostrich-like cassowary bird. The next information comes from a local hunter who tried to snare the creature and claims he saw it briefly.
Dragon, it fell down and fire came out from that dragon.
It fell down?
Yeah, it fell down and fire came out from its body.
Really?
Yeah.
And that's the last you saw of it?
Yeah, from there, he came back from there.
How big was it?
Oh, it was big as that tree up there. That body was big as that tree.
Superstition, fantasy, fact. The question is how much there is of each.
How late do you know?
Oh, it was something like somewhere about 12 midnight.
Bryce and his party go to the next village, where one local has reported a close personal encounter.
And I want to shut it, but...
Maybe this would yield more clues, and most important, where to look.
What have you found?
When we went there, we found a lizard.
Really? You found a lizard?
Yeah.
Yeah? How big?
I think 10 feet long.
Good, good. That's mighty. Right. Well, do you think it's necessary to shoot some bait for this lizard, or should we just stake out the waterhole?
No, it should be take out the waterhole.
We should just stake out the waterhole. Great. Oh, that sounds promising indeed. Right.
And so the explorers move on to the exact spot where the creature was reported.
Chances of getting this monitor lizard are very, very good. From the sightings that we've got from the national people, we can conclude that the lizard does exist. I'm very positive in the attitude that we will find at least a 10-foot monitor lizard. I think time is our biggest factor. We need more time.
The waiting goes on, night and day, a matter of patience and silence, and the knowledge that any attempt to meet up with the creature could take several weeks. In all, groups of explorers in shifts will spend 2 months in the bush. For Bryce, one day merges into another. It is said that the giant creature moves over the tangled growth from tree to tree, and that he could appear all too suddenly, catching an observer off guard. A faint sound comes from the forest, something approaching. They are monitors, but still a most extraordinary sight. Their tongues are sharply forked and their teeth can make deep wounds. They will eat almost any animal or bird or large insect that they can kill. These lizards are drawn to the swamp because all are natural swimmers. In the water, they hold their legs against their sides and weave their bodies to drive themselves forward. They can stand up on their hind legs, the way the dragon is said to. Sighting them spurs on the explorers to keep waiting for the creature called Atrilia. More weeks go by, and now a surprise. This giant lizard resembles the famed Komodo dragon, twice as large as the one seen here so far. It's at least 8 feet long, from nose to tail. The large, menacing claws are just like those in the reports of Atrilia. But the tail is much thicker than the one the natives have usually described. Now the young explorers converge on the Strickland River, below the rapids. The boating party comes down from the north, while others join them from the Fly River to the south. Americans Stan Glass and others plan a survey of an area thought to be densely populated by crocodiles. The Operation Drake parties have formed a special kind of fleet. With the extra manpower and scientific experts, they intend to conduct a crocodile count, a first step in helping the people to use their natural resources in the best possible way. After all the hardships of the jungle, this trip feels like a vacation. They head deeper and deeper into the bush, where local people come out to the river to greet them. On their way to the crocodiles, the young people stop at one village to help conduct a census and some elementary medical tests for the government.
Say, Pat, could you ask her to Could you ask her to come over?
They spend time with the natives and gain answers for a detailed questionnaire.
By walking us 3 to 4 days?
Yeah,
6 kilos.
Sally Mountford of New Zealand checks the weights of the babies. It is obvious that they are suffering from malnutrition because of unbalanced diets. For the explorers, there is a powerful awakening to the needs of people in undeveloped areas like this one.
13 centimeters.
What are you?
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Before moving on, Stan inspects the skull of an enormous crocodile.
That is huge.
The breeding and raising of crocodiles for their skins is a key industry in Papua New Guinea, important for the economy. For every pound of meat consumed, a baby crocodile will grow ½ a pound in weight. The survey will take place in a remote spot where crocodiles used to be heavily killed. Along with Stan Glass is a member of the United Nations Development Programme, Jerome Montague. To conduct the survey, most of the work must be done at night.
Have you come up this far before?
No. I don't think there's been but maybe 4 or 5 parties of people from the outside that have ever been up here.
Huh.
There was one in 1937, one in 54, and a couple of crocodile shooters in the 60s.
So this is pretty much new territory right now, because the 60s, that's a while back. So any who's been shot off, you think they've been
Yeah,
more
I
or
think
less...
they probably have had a pretty good recovery time. It's been about 7 years since any hunting by expatriates has been allowed here.
It's clear that the crocodile population here is large and that their high density can be the basis of new industrial development. A plan can be devised to allow culling of crocodiles while maintaining a stable population.
Time?
750. No, it's not shallow.
Several hundred have been spotted so far. It almost feels as if they are in a kind of haunted house, surrounded by ghostly apparitions and unseen spirits.
Was coming right at us, man.
As the counting continues, it's clear that there is no shortage of these creatures here. The crocodiles are vital to the local economy. Perhaps the survey will be the beginning of new hope for the next generations of Papua New Guineans. Another phase of Operation Drake comes to an end. Each group of young explorers returns to the eye of the wind from uniquely different expeditions. Probably never again in their lives will they have so much experience of this very special kind.
They're That's it, brilliant.
They have explored the past by going back to the source, and in the process they have made new history on their own. Stan Glass and Clem Graham have a chance to compare notes.
Counting good. Well, pretty good. How many did you see?
All in all, over 900.
900?
Yeah. One night it'd be about anywhere from 19 to some nights being over 60.
Each has more to tell than time will allow, but the excitement of completing their missions can hardly be contained.
Any shark?
No, we didn't see a shark. Not in Raval Harbour.
Stingray?
Yeah, saw quite a big one, about 15 odd feet.
Rupert, where are you? The Great Pumpkin Award to Rupert for services rendered on the mighty Strickland.
Miss Strickland, 1979.
Sally Mountford of New Zealand gets the honour of wearing the good luck garter that the explorers have carried with them all during the trip. Leaving Papua New Guinea, the Eye of the Wind continues its 2-year circumnavigation of the globe. Its final journey will take new explorers to countries such as Indonesia and Kenya, up through the Mediterranean on their way home to Great Britain and the conclusion of Operation Drake, 2 years after it all began.